Hey, great to be here again. Today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit controversial, at least in most people's minds. I'm going to be talking about not just extraterrestrials or interdimensionals. I'm going to be talking about something known as the Saturn-Moon Matrix. And it's something that was created by a non-human race in order to control humans. It's a fake reality. The Gnostics talk about it in their ancient texts, and they call these people the archons. They're not really people, they're more of an energetic distortion, really, if you really get down to their base form. But they do take forms, but they usually operate outside of human sight because our atmosphere is not good for them. So when they do come in, they can only stay for a certain amount of time. Anyway, what they did was they are responsible for bringing the moon into the orbit of the Earth. And what happened was, before the moon came in, we had what I'd call a heart society and a realization that this world was an illusion and that we were all in this world but not of it, which made for a great place to visit, I guess you'd call, on our. And supposedly we used to live these really long lives, like in the Bible, even though that's not very accurate. You see people living to be 900,000 years old. I'm willing to bet that that did happen back before the hijack or the schism, whatever you want to call it, where this non-human entity distorted humanity in a way where they created a fake reality that generated the most fear, because that's what they thrive off of, is fear energy, which is why we have so many wars and whatnot. But the moon was brought in, and it's basically a spacecraft. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie They Live. Hold on a minute. So the movie They Live was about, there was this, damn it, there were these people who didn't look, everybody looked human, but there were these sunglasses that this guy finds. When he puts them on, everything changes. Like, certain people who look human look like aliens. And all the billboards and magazines say things like obey, don't question your government, money is your God. And it was a very interesting movie, because what was making all these alien people look human was a satellite dish on top of the tallest building, I guess, in the area. So the main character eventually breaks down the satellite dish, symbolic of the moon, and then you could see all the supposed aliens as what they really were. And you'd see that a lot of the people in power, the people that would read the news, some of the people, richer people in the supermarket and whatnot, they were all human alien hybrids, I guess, whatever you want to call them. I know this is going to some strange territory, but figure what the hell. I might as well get into some really interesting stuff. So anyway, and Saturn is another part of this matrix, but the moon is a base. It's like a inside there. There's something happening inside the moon. There's this great book. I forget who wrote it, but it's called "Who Built the Moon," and talks about all the anomalies and whatnot about the moon. And a lot of the things that are very interesting is all the craters are pretty uniform depth, which means that they've had explosions on the moon, and that the moon rang like a gong, like it was hollow. So there's something inside the moon, and we never see the dark side of the moon, which would lead me to believe that there are things. And I've seen pictures of structures on the moon, and usually those are photoshopped out. But I have seen a few of them, and they were very interesting, very technologically advanced. And you can deny them all you want, but they were shown to be there, and there were faces on the moon, like rock. I don't know about rocks, but something, yeah, rock formation looked just like a face. All kinds of like a bunch of those, and inside the moon, supposedly there is a very strong fortress, and based on the book Who Built the Moon, they say the moon it's too big for our planet. It's too light for its size, which means it's hollowed out. And the Zulu have a saying about the moon that it's a hollowed out egg. The moon is an egg. It was brought over by the Water Brothers, as they're called, the Chittahuri, children of the serpent. It was placed there in order to control and create a fake reality. It's not just the moon, though, it's also Saturn. Now, Saturn is a very interesting planet. There is a bunch of stuff with Saturn. There's a book called The Saturn Myth. If you haven't read that, where Saturn's rings, especially the rings, and Saturn that used to be our primary light source at one point. So the ancient sun gods were really worshiping Saturn, and there's Saturn symbolism everywhere in the ancient world. And it's usually seen as a planet with a little beard of light. And I think one of the Muslim countries has a flag that symbolizes it. And there's usually the two towers. Two twin towers is also another symbol of Saturn. So is the six-pointed star and the six-pointed, the whatever you call that thing, not a pentagon, but a hexagon. A hexagon is another symbol, and a black cube is also another symbol of Saturn, because a hexagon is a flattened out cube. And the people in Mecca worship a black cube, and they're around it in concentric circles in Mecca, and they'd have them going around it next. Who knows? But the rings of Saturn, a mainstream scientist, a mainstream whatever astronomist, I guess you'd call him. I don't know. He was at NASA, and one of the most mainstream guys you can meet. And he noticed a change in the ring size in less than 5 minutes. And he saw what he called electromagnetic vehicles, which were bigger than the size of Earth, going out and spitting out some kind of crystalline substance into the rings. And there are photos of this. I'm not sure where you can find them except in a few books, but I think the Saturn Myth has some pictures of it. They were big too, relative to Earth. Some of them were possibly larger than Earth. But if you're looking at Saturn, the size relativity is quite different. But there were actually pictures of it and video of these electromagnetic vehicles, and somebody recorded the sounds of Saturn and looked at the rings of Saturn and said that those are sound waves. And the sounds that come out of Saturn, I would suggest, are a broadcasting frequency that is going to Earth and is amplified by the moon, and which is creating the reality that we see today, rather than the upper eons, as the Gnostics called it. We're now in the lower eons, which is why our world is in such disarray. Now, this might be a lot to take in, but myself doing tons of research on this over the years, and it really is a fascinating concept. And how it works is they see these entities who are, you could say, possessed maybe, or controlled by this distortion, electromagnetic distortion, whatever you want to call it. It's called, the Gnostics called it the demiurge, which is the head archon. And the archons are very robotic, and they envy humans because they do not have creative imagination. They cannot create anything creatively, but they can distort things that are already there. For example, if you gave them a blank sheet of paper, they couldn't do anything with it. Give them something harmonious and joyous, and they can twist it and bend it to be the way it is now, our world. And our world is mostly generating fear right now. Right? But it is changing. People are waking up. People are starting to wake up from fear and negative emotions. But to an extent, it's still mostly run by fear, especially the way they are programming our young in the school system. Like I said before, to think of everything as apart from each other when we're all really just one consciousness. And I do believe that the moon coming in is what caused the Great Flood, like I said in the previous video. And the reason that happened is because it caused the Earth to tilt on an axis. It was not on an axis before, it was straight. And having a gravitational pull like that, and it really is weird how the moon is so light for its size. Like I said, it's hollowed out. But the book, Who Built the Moon, one guy actually said the biggest explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon does not exist because it is so improbable. And another person said that it was placed where it is, like the proverbial Swiss watchmaker, something like life could not exist, or something, if the moon was not exactly where it was in relation to the sun and the earth. And notice how when there's an eclipse, the sun and the moon appear exactly the same size. I mean, the moon is like 1,000 something times smaller than the sun, and it's 1,000 something times closer to the earth than the sun. And it's unbelievable how it affects certain people. When there's a full moon, the word lunatic comes from the base word luna, which means moon. So the moon definitely screwed us up. I don't really agree with that life was not possible without the moon. That was just one astronomer's opinion. But what I will say is that I've always questioned the moon, even as a child. Why is it there? What does it serve? What purpose does it serve? And reading all these different books about the world and the universe and whatnot, and some other stuff, really gives you more of a perspective. And when I said before that this world is an illusion, it is an illusion. And what these archons did, as the Gnostics called them, is what they did was they basically hijacked our reality. They hacked it and they changed it using the Saturn-Moon Matrix. It's hard to explain how exactly this works, but what Saturn is sending out is electromagnetic information that our brain decodes. It is amplified by the moon, and the same thing was happening before, except without Saturn and the moon. Before we had a decoded reality that was much more pleasant, a really great place to go and spend a few centuries and enjoy yourself. And a lot of people are starting to do that again. They're not letting a false reality dictate their lives, which is amazing that people are starting to wake up to this information and raising their vibrational frequency so that they're no longer in fear. Because once you get out of fear and go into the higher love-based emotions, this matrix no longer has hold over you. Sure, you still have to live in it, but your experience of it will change. It's kind of like a feedback loop, a vicious cycle from which we rarely emerge, as Don Juan Matus said in a Carlos Castaneda book. And I mean, you can all take this as you wish, but I've done extensive research into this and how the world is controlled and how things work. And I've really been fascinated by the whole unfolding of this story as it's unfolded. And I've gotten different sources, different people, and I don't really, you can disagree with me all you want, which I assume most people will because they haven't really studied this to the depth that I have. But the world is not the way you think it is. It is not solid. It is not the real world. It is a copy. It's a bad copy of our previous world that was much, much more of a place of just wonderful, blissful, heart-centered world. And the more people today that connect with their hearts and love each other, unconditional love, and the more people that start to do that, the more we'll transition out of this negative vibe, negative world, and the better we'll be at transitioning to a heart-centered, third-eyed world. And there's a reason why they put fluoride in the water. It calcifies the pineal gland, which will open us up to other realities. Now, I actually had cancer on my pineal gland when I was 16. We found out I had it when I was 16, but I'd probably had it since birth, but it was slow growing. So I've never had too many I've had a few psychic experiences, but in order to see beyond the program, you got to think beyond the program, and the program is what keeps us in our fear-based mindset, which keeps us entrapped in this matrix. And another thing that keeps us trapped is the speed of light, and people saying that it's the fastest speed. And in the Bible, the Old Testament Bible, which postulates God said, "Let there be light." And I would speculate that "let there be light" was the less than 0.005% that we can actually see kind of light, which before we had a much wider range of colors and vision. But when they created the fake world, the demiurge, which was the Old Testament God, who would kill people and get afraid when they built a tower too high close to him and scattered them throughout the world, speaking different, the Tower of Babel myth, that was the evil Saturnite God. And it's kind of hard to explain this if you don't know the nature of reality the way that I've studied it, but it all does fit together pretty cleanly. And the way out is to see ourselves as who we truly are, the infinite, forever. We are infinite possibility, infinite awareness, infinite love. I can tell you one last story about that. The Saturn-Moon Matrix is very sinister, is because these entities who have taken us over or tried to take us over are terrified of us waking up. And they're doing everything they can to stop this from happening. But it's starting to happen on massive scale. More people are not believing the things they hear on the news. Most people don't. And it may be kind of a stretch to say that this world is a bad copy of another world that was great. But if you really think about it, all they have to do is interfere with the information field that we are decoding. And then we decode a certain world at a certain consciousness. And as we raise our consciousness, more positive things start to happen for us, which is why I say the way out of this imprisonment, and it is just like the Matrix movie in a way. We're being harvested for our energy, but just our negative fear-based energy, because that's what this distortion thrives off of. So when you invert something like love, you invert love, it goes to fear. They invert everything. They invert crosses for Satanism. They invert pentagrams for Satanism. And Satanism is really worshiping them. Demons are them. Jinn are them. And they're the ones that created this fake world. The Gnostics call them the Archons, of course, which I've talked about. But I think tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the Archon more, talk a little bit more about the pedophilia and why that's so important and why they would used to sacrifice young virgins to the gods all the time back in, and still today they do that, but they do it in secret. They sacrifice children all the time. They abuse children all the time. These elites in power and in Hollywood, they do this. There is absolute proof about this stuff, and there is a reason for it. And it's not going to be pleasant to talk about, but there is a very good reason why they do it. And even elite families abuse their own children. There was a Rothschild who got out of the family and changed his name. And he said incest was a part of life. And what that does is it makes them psychopathic. It makes them have less empathy. Makes them behave. When you attack the base chakra, it messes you up big time. It scrambles your brain in a certain way to make you act a certain. There's so much to get into. I could just read from all the books I've read, but the Saturn-Moon Matrix, it only has power over us if we allow it to have power over us. And that is through fear energy. When we expand our consciousness beyond mind, beyond, and think of ourselves as infinite beings, as many near-death experiencers talk about. If we see ourselves as that rather than little me, I'm just so-and-so who runs a store, or so-and-so who does whatever. We see ourselves as infinite beings, eternal beings. This matrix no longer has us in the program, in the trap, in the prison. And it's said that even after we die, we're still in a low vibrational state. We have to come back to this earth. We're just recycled back. And if we're that's the whole theory of reincarnation, where you have to come back so many times in order to become enlightened. But I love the description by David Icke about enlightenment. He uses the imagery of a he calls it like a flute gate or something. It's something that holds water, you know. And it's like you do not have to become enlightened. You just have to let enlightenment in. So you open up the gate and whoosh, you become enlightened. But the what is holding enlightenment back are all these programs like onion skins that you have to keep removing, limiting beliefs and whatnot. And once you do that, you will see the world and yourself in a completely different way to what most people do. And it is a very bizarre concept, but I do believe the Matrix movie does do a pretty good job of explaining the false reality. And the idea that the machines were the ones that took over is very, very good concerning the Archons, as they are robotic-like creatures. They're like cyborgs. But anyway, I'm going to talk about the Archons tomorrow in more detail. I'll tell that story about the Nag Hammadi text. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it got into some strange territory, but I just wanted to talk about something that I don't think most people have heard of, unless of course you read the books I've read or have listened to some talks by David Icke. You probably haven't heard of or read about these things. And there is ample evidence for a lot of this stuff. Interesting story. So I'll talk tomorrow more. See you tomorrow.